Welcome to Do What Matters Most. This is episode 22 in the series 21st-Century Children. Research showing how to build confidence and self-esteem includes the valuable role of emotions, and not just positive emotions. Learn how to become a good emotion coach for your children and for your friends, and improve your relationships and build social confidence for yourself and your children. Visit mattersmostmedia.org to find more about the podcast and other resources. On firstanswers.com, you can also find a free mini-course ebook on emotional resilience and self-reliance and a full course that includes a section on emotion coaching.
This is the sixth episode in a series having to do with the creation of social confidence and self-esteem. A lot of the ideas in this series can be applied to adults as well as to children. And as it turns out, this series has received the largest number of listeners to any of the programs that I've done over the years I've been conducting these podcasts. And I believe the reason for that is because we live at a time where there is so much divisiveness and confusion and false information and a lot of other influences through social media that we and our children face, which are not the actual acquisition of experience with people, and it doesn't lead to confidence with them and so on because of the absence of the experience. Imagine that you spend 2 or 3 hours as a child playing computer games, and that same 2 or 3 hours is not the same kind of experience you'd get if you were playing outdoors or somewhere else, even in a board game on a table in a home, because there's not real live people at the other end of it. Or if there are live people who are participating with each other, that live participation is influenced by the fact that we often do not see facial expressions that match up with voice tones. And so we get a chat room or we get other methods of messaging, which I think are wonderful in most cases, but it still is not the same thing as actual involvement with people. Then without this kind of experience or preparation, we go to a large group meeting like church, for example, and start feeling anxious because we're there. It might be because we're apprehensive about all of the cues that are available in a large group, like facial expressions or voice tones or meeting a lot of people or just being present, that we tend to feel some anxiety, which affects social confidence. Then, as it turns out, negative emotions are a source of low self-esteem. In the self-esteem literature, Stanley Coopersmith of yesteryear, several decades ago, did some very prominent research demonstrating that the principal sources of self-esteem from his perspective were achievement, moral values, and a certain amount of social skills and social acceptance. Another line of research was focused on the role of the emotions that children and adults feel, and their research turned up the idea, fairly conclusively by the way, that while negative emotions are not the sole cause of low self-esteem, they are a significant factor that should not ever be ignored. Well, anyone who has dealt with a child or as an adult has dealt with low self-esteem knows that anxiety is almost always a part of that, and sometimes negative social experiences are part of that, and sometimes believing that you're a failure or inadequate are part of that, and so on. So today, I want to focus on the significant role of emotions, and this will end up being a 2-part series. So this is Self-Confidence and Self-Esteem number 6, part A, and the other podcast will occur soon. Most parents want to support the growth of their children. We all know that, but a lot of us don't know the best way to accomplish it. And so developing social confidence and self-esteem might either be very new or it is so embedded in traditional parenthood that parents do something without knowing much about it and miss opportunities to help promote it. As it turns out, though, there's increasing awareness that whatever it takes to promote confidence and self-esteem for our children and for us may require something different than what they've been getting. Our 21st century children, for example, as I've mentioned, are in circumstances and environments that didn't exist 20 years ago. And so it makes sense to conclude that they might and we might need something in addition to what has been traditional. We now have very clear evidence that excessive use of computers and phones and internet have a lot of consequences which we have not previously identified. Some of these have to do with the slowing of the development of the brain. Now, what happens in all of this is that the evidence is very clear also that the fairly rapid increase in the percentages of young people or adults who suffer from depression and debilitating anxieties, or who are addicted at an early age, they have problems with social confidence and self-esteem. More dramatic than these, however, is the increase of numbers of young people who engage in violence and those who attempt and succeed at suicide, which is so traumatic it is hard to even mention. In some studies of high school students, for example, as many as 36% of those surveyed indicated they had felt depressed and had considered suicide. And that was research that was a year or two old. This year it's probably greater than that. So I want to introduce you to something that parents can do which dramatically improve the chances of themselves and their children having social confidence and high self-esteem. It is called emotion coaching. Now, emotion coaching is a form of parent-child communication that can prevent many negative emotions and create a strong sense of both confidence and self-esteem. Emotion coaching is a term created by John Gottman. He described it as a method parents can use to help their children learn about their emotions and learn how to regulate and also learn how to display them confidently in social situations. His research is quite substantial and very clear, supporting the idea of emotion coaching. Parents who are healthy emotion coaches have much to offer their children. And when it comes to confidence, emotion coaching turns out to offer a lot for that. So I'm going to begin by describing 4 types of parental responses to children's emotions, and then you can see where emotion coaching fits in. Type number 1. When children display emotions, parents might disapprove. They might be disapproving parents who act as if negative emotions are wrong in a moral sense. They may show their disapproval by getting upset. Parents might display annoyance and may even punish their children for their negative emotions. As it turns out, children in these situations are often confused, believe some emotions are wrong, and often feel guilty about them. It's an amazing thing to be a psychologist, for example, and to have a woman say, "I am feeling this, is that wrong?" What would be the right thing to do when right and wrong do not apply to emotions? In this case, children of emotional coaches parent. They may even feel something is wrong with them because they have these emotions and often have difficulty regulating them. Then there are parents that are called dismissing parents who ridicule, make fun of, and generally communicate they think children's emotions are unimportant. Now, here's what dismissing means. A child is talking to a parent, expressing something of importance to them. The parent's attention wanders, and they end up thinking about something else, or they just walk away and they dismiss their children. Now, they do this, as it turns out, because the parents, may not understand their own emotions. And these parents often are uncomfortable when their children display emotions, and what the parents want to do is to get away from them as fast as possible. Now, are children confused about their emotions in these situations? Likely. And oftentimes the children are engaged in emotional behavior they don't understand. They also tend to feel lonely, and they may engage in emotional behavior that's destructive, while at the same time they're trying to find some form of fulfillment. It's like a child who is lonely, for example, who wants companionship, may seek loneliness in a way that actually produces more distance. Parent type number 3 is called permissive indifferent parents who fail to recognize their children's emotions and go on with their lives as if no emotion has ever been expressed. Children often have emotions that are out of control. They may engage in emotional behavior that is self-centered, and they may not recognize the consequences for emotional behavior for themselves or for others. Well, when all of these things happen, quite often the permissive, indifferent parents just don't want to deal with it, so they'll just blow past it. And this is a source of conflict between many parents because one parent will say, no, we can't ignore that. When a child is angry, for example, and says something rude to a parent, then that needs to be dealt with. And the other parent will say, no, I don't think so. Just let it slide and it'll pass and then things will go on. It's a conflict between parents that I've seen on many occasions. Now, type number 4 are called emotion coaches. And these are parents who treat positive and negative emotions as opportunities to bring themselves together with their children. They are called emotion coaches because they listen, they understand, they guide, they help solve, and they help children learn how to manage and display their feelings. Emotion coaches also, as it turns out, tend to promote positive emotions, and they help their children understand their negative emotions. Now think about that with me just for a minute. We want our children to have positive emotions, so sometimes we'll shut down the negative. As it turns out, that is not a successful strategy. What we want to do is to have positive emotions and find ways to behave and think that will lead to more of those. But we also want to communicate that negative emotions are worth understanding and then worth regulating. Now, as it turns out, emotion coaches tend to be more mature emotionally. They tend to have confidence themselves and better self-esteem. And as it turns out, they and their children face adversity better, which means they are more likely to cope successfully with the depression and anxiety, low self-esteem, or the absence of confidence. Now, in this case, children are more likely to successfully establish intimate relationships with others. Well, why? Well, human relationships, by and large, are emotional affairs. The signals that people pass one through the other are emotional cues, or the conversations that we have emotional messages attached to them who, when we can understand and infer them accurately, tends to help people feel successful in their marriages and families. Plus, as it turns out, a lot of people, mostly women, want to establish emotional intimacy with their partners because they feel close and they feel loved when they do. Now let's consider another list of the qualities that healthy parent emotion coaches tend to display. Now the word display just means express or show on their faces or their nonverbal gestures. Emotion coaches tend to respect children's emotions, even negative ones, and they think talking about them is an opportunity, as I've mentioned, to grow close to the child. Emotion coaches patiently listen and tolerate spending time with the child, even enjoy that as an opportunity to draw close to them. They see negative emotions as an opportunity to understand rather than to disapprove, get frustrated at children, or dismiss them. Emotion coaches spend time with their children, often when they are sad, angry, or fearful, instead of saying, go to your room and go away from me because I don't want to have to deal with your emotions. Well, sometimes that might be appropriate, but quite often it's better to find a child who's sad or angry or fearful and go to them and say, come and talk to me, help me understand. An emotion coach is also very aware of their own emotions. They can identify different feelings, they can name them, and they can understand how they express or display them to other people and in some situations. Emotion coaches do not make fun of their emotions, ridicule them, or criticize themselves for them. Emotion coaches, as parents, do not tell children how to feel, and they often do not tell other people how to feel or what they feel. This language typically would not occur. Well, you're feeling upset, or you're angry, and somebody will say, well, no, I'm not. Well, yes, you are. Well, that conversation doesn't occur if emotion coaching is occurring. It's also true that an emotion coach is able to connect a child's emotional state, that is the body's response, a child's emotional experience, what he's feeling and can talk about, and how the child is displaying it. In other words, emotion coaches often are intuitive and they make good inferences and they understand about a child and can say they may make errors, but they will correctly say, well, if you're not sad, then maybe you're frustrated. And the child might say yes. Now, you can imagine if you just go one step farther down the path of life to a few years later, and you can imagine the conversation between married people where somebody is saying, wow, you seem upset. Well, no, I'm not. Well, okay, then could you tell me what's going on? And if that person is a good emotional coach to the spouse, that spouse will feel safe talking about their feelings, would open themselves even more so that they can be understood and appreciated and loved. When that doesn't exist between a couple, for example, then mistrust does, and miscommunication does, and therefore problems that are created by miscommunication are frequent, way too frequent, and cause problems for these married couples. So here's the deal. Do you want to learn how to be a good emotion coach so that you can apply it to other adults and to your children? I hope the answer is yes. Now, again, what's the reason for this? Well, the reason is that good emotion coaches are successful in their relationships with the people by and large because they, one, notice and accurately recognize their own feelings and the feelings of other people. They also recognize that a child's emotional response or another adult's emotional response is an opportunity for intimacy and understanding. They listen empathically. That is, they say, wow, I can understand that. They help the other person or the child find words to label or describe the emotion. For example, so are you feeling sad or happy or cheerful or whatever? And are you happy about that or sad about that? Emotion coaches also set limits of when and how emotions can be displayed. And they tend to search for strategies to solve the problem. So if a parent is talking to a child, the parent might say, well, I know you're upset, but let's talk about what would be best for you to do when you're upset. Well, let's solve the problem, do you think? And they will do the same about the emotional response of their partners and other adults. Now, it gets down to this question. Are you willing to do this enough so that you can succeed and be successful? Well, I propose that if you are, then one of the things you would like to do is to learn how to manage your own emotions better. So I am going to propose that part 2 of this number 6 item in this series is called How to Manage My Own Emotions Better so I can have more self-confidence and self-esteem.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Do What Matters Most, which is sponsored by firstanswers.com, where you can find new tools for families and parents of 21st century kids with a focus on emotional self-reliance. Visit firstanswers.com to sign up for a free newsletter. Find Do What Matters Most on Facebook and our website, mattersmostmedia.org, where you can ask Dr. Scoresby your own questions. Remember to subscribe to stay up to date with new episodes. Give us a rating and write a review on the podcast app or Google Podcasts and let us know what you think about Do What Matters Most.